Hi everyone and welcome to this episode of the Fret Success Guitar Show. I'm here at the Block Heater Festival 2020 in Calgary. I'm joined by the David Wax Museum. Hi guys, thanks for coming over.
Our pleasure, thanks for having us.
All the way from Charlottesville.
That's right.
We've got David here and Sue's here. I'd love to talk about who you are and kind of what you do in the band and a little bit of history, really. That'd be cool.
Great.
Sure. We started the band in 2007, and we have been touring around the world kind of since 2009. We kind of left the Boston area where we got started and started touring more extensively throughout the States and Europe and Canada. And now we call Charlottesville, Virginia home, which is where Suze grew up. We draw heavily from Mexican folk music, but we have a foot in indie rock and American folk. And this weekend at the Block Heater Festival, we're playing as a trio with our drummer, multi-instrumentalist, Danilo Enriquez, and he's been playing with us for the last 5 years. We just put out our 7th studio record called Line of Light just in the last 6 months.
My name is Sue Slezak, and I play fiddle and accordion and sing in the band. And for the early part of our band days, I played an instrument that was made from the jawbone of a donkey. So that was kind of like in our bio, and people get excited about the donkey jawbone. But in the past year, it's been giving me nerve pain, which is kind of intense. It's been hurting me, and so I've been taking a break, so I don't have the donkey jawbone at this festival.
Having a break in Calgary. Okay.
Exactly. But David and I met in 2007 and started the band, and we now tour with our 2 kids and often a 5-piece band. It's been really an adventure to get to experience the world through music and sharing in that way. We get to interact with so many people, and although people think you get to kind of see all these incredible places in the world, often it's just the back door and green rooms that you see. But it's still this amazing. The music is such a vessel and lets us interact with people we would have never met, like you.
I've been introduced to your music quite recently, and it's definitely a cacophony of all sorts of influences and all sorts of things going on, which is what makes it so appealing, I think. All sorts of instruments, and do you have people standing in to play those things? So how does that all work? Because you've got obviously Mexican influence, Americana influence, folk, electronics in there as well, and you've got drums, piano, and all sorts of things going on. So who does what?
Well, I mean, I guess there's 2 different ways to answer that. Some of that, is what happens in the studio, where it's very loose, where lots of people are picking up lots of different instruments, and we have a large family of musicians that are kind of part of the museum and have been part of the studio records. And that's a lot more amorphous. And we both have a background in piano, and so in the piano and key world, that's something we both can kind of jump into a little bit. I have percussive ideas but can't implement them. So the live show is, I guess there's a couple ways to think about that. One is what do you do when you have to fly into a festival like this? And in a way, it's kind of what's our simplest, most streamlined version of the band? And for me, it's okay, I'm just gonna play 1 acoustic guitar, 1 of my small Mexican guitars. In the studio, I'll have 5 or 6 different stringed instruments from Mexico that all have very different textures and tunings and are played in different styles. So in the studio, I want to have all those available, but live, it's what's the most simple thing we can do? And I have a little synthesizer that's just a handheld little synthesizer that I can use for the live set. And when we're touring with the van and all our equipment, Suze is playing more keyboards. But here it's all right, bringing the accordion and the fiddle is the most streamlined version, kind of transposing the keyboard parts to the accordion. And using an octave pedal on the violin to cover some of the more of the bass stuff when we don't have our bass player with us. And then our drummer is playing a little Yamaha synth, and so a lot of the bass parts and some of these different kind of synth pads are covered back there with him. And then all three of us are singing. So we feel like we're covering a lot of ground as a trio, but you have to kind of very quickly adapt to a different reality, and kind of some of that's dictated by what can you fly with, and what can we we bring so much equipment, it has to be under 50 pounds to get in the suitcase. And we've just got back from this UK tour as this trio, and so we're kind of trying to reimagine the songs for the three of us in this context.
So you've been doing that a lot?
Just in 2020, it's been kind of a way to do some international touring, but not lose our shirts over it.
So when you go through your songwriting process, you've got obviously there's no limits by the sound that I can pick up. You kind of just whatever the song requires. But how does that process start? What's the typical way of doing it? Is there one?
I mean, yeah, there is a typical start. I feel like, at least I've been listening to my friend Joe Pug's podcast and kind of hearing people talk about whether you're someone that maybe starts with a guitar and just kind of can write a song, and basically you could play it and sing all the words just on a guitar and kind of build it verse, chorus, and bridge and kind of that, or another style writing that's more of you're in the studio and you're kind of setting the BPM and coming up with the drum loop that you're playing to, and then kind of cutting and pasting and rearranging the song like that. And I'm more the first way.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of strengths using anything in the studio from an engineering perspective or kind of that technical side. So for me, it's always been having one of these stringed instruments in my hands. The trick for me is kind of coming up with different ways to generate new material and to be doing that as often as possible. And so I have a lot of techniques I've developed over the years where I'll sit down and kind of give myself a window and some parameters, kind of starting without any idea, but kind of just riffing off of some lick or something that, there's some melodic line I've been thinking about or singing. And so a lot of it's kind of improvisation and riffing and trying to kind of lose myself in it.
Often what will happen is he will be upstairs doing that kind of improvisational jamming solo and kind of spouting ideas, and I'll be downstairs working on something and kind of hear this little section that sounds incredible. It sounds like, oh wow, that's such a beautiful line or a really cool hook. And so I'll kind of run upstairs and be like, David, did you do that thing again? And he'll be like, oh, what thing? As if he has no clue that he just kind of sang this gorgeous line. Mm-hmm. But luckily it's all recorded, so we can go, he'll have his little recorder on, so we'll go back and I'll be like, that's it.
Yeah, it's much easier now, isn't it, when you get everything recorded.
Definitely.
I find the problem with that though is that you get into idea overload sometimes, and if you're not keeping on top of it.
That's why, to have a partner who comes and pinpoints what.
That's good, you need that person. Because one thing I really like about your music is the harmonies work so well, not just vocally, but instrumentally. It all just complements each other and creates textures. How does it go from being a simple, rustic guitar and vocal to this cacophony of sound, basically?
Yeah, I mean, some of that is just the process of being in the studio, and I think I've always loved records and songs that are produced to kind of this more maximal, fleshed out, kind of multi-dimensional, vibrant world. That's, I think, the stuff that when I was a kid and started listening to recorded music, that's the stuff that made me feel like there's this entire world out there that's kind of condensed into a song, or that it's a gateway into a whole other's experience beyond my own. And so I think that as we've started As we've kind of looked for producers, for a lot of the earlier records, we've kind of gone very fully in that direction. With the latest record, I think we tried to kind of pull back a little bit and get down to the core of what we really kind of love doing, which is singing together and being in a room, and try to resist some of those urges to kind of keep elaborating and expanding and trying to kind of hone it a little bit more. And so we thought we found a really great studio and producer for that kind of record. But a lot of it is, I mean, it's hard to generalize beyond that, because every time we've gone in there and every song has kind of been different in terms of like, are we starting with a bunch of people in a room doing basic tracking to get the rhythm track and, you know, kind of a guide that we can go back and re-sing it and then start adding things from there. Yeah. And I think, you know, one of the challenges of being a recording artist in 2020 is that it's limitless in terms of what you can add. And so I think there's a push and pull too, because Suze I think had experiences in the studio where she's kind of had a flavor of that, like the kind of elaboration and adding tons of her vocals and tons of her violins, and you know, I think has come to it more slowly because her background is more as kind of growing up playing in an old time traditional music community. Okay. So not kind of like going in the studio and building this whole world, you know, it's kind of like, well, what's the core is like the voices and the harmonies and the, you know. So we kind of come from different perspectives, and then we kind of have the producer and have the band, and, you know, there is this, it's kind of gonna go in all these different directions, and we're kind of loosely steering it with our push and pull of kind of where we're coming from.
Our producer from this last record described it as like a Ouija board, you know that thing? So you're sort of controlling it, but it sort of has a life of its own. And that's really what the feeling in the studio.
You relish in that environment more than, say, pre-production and compositional. You kind of, let's go in the studio and we like that environment and it makes us vibe off each other. Is that where you make most of your music?
Well,
no.
No, it's too, I mean, we don't have our own studio.
Yeah.
So it's you know, you're constrained by kind of time and money when you're in the studio in a different way. Yeah. We've been very fortunate that our experiences in the studio have been in places where we felt relaxed and not like we were on the clock. And the vast majority, at least of the lyrics and the melodies and the structure of the song is all happening before that. Mm-hmm. And I love kind of the pre-production time, working with Suze and then bringing in a producer to hear the songs and kind of help craft them at that stage as well. We've just finished up a new project, and you know, I was trying to work on some of these songs for years, and I finally, you know, just having the recording date in the calendar was like, all right, well then it's just like you finally have to force yourself to finish, and you kind of just have to make those decisions, lyrical decisions or structural decisions. To just be, for me, it's helpful to just have that be as far advanced as possible, to not waste time in the studio, but to still be open to that evolving and changing, of course, in light of kind of, you want to have, there's some magic when you're in the studio and everybody's there, and so you don't want to totally negate that or close the door on that happening.
Okay, I'd like to go over a little bit more about maybe your guitar playing, David, foundations.
Oh, I don't have very many.
Okay, because like when I listen to your chord progressions, they're not straightforward. They sound like they're going to be, and then they take like a twist and just keep you hooked, and they kind of meander, and you go, it's really cool and interesting. So is that just something natural that you just do? Or?
What do you think?
Well, I mean, I wonder if some of the chord progressions are really influenced by the Mexican folk music that he's spent a lot of time studying and learning about. That might be what you're hearing. This is a compliment, but it's not going to sound like one. Some of the songs on this latest album, we were kind of in conflict about what key they were in, because he thought it starts on the 4 chord, which is kind of unusual. And so he thought it was in that key, even though I was certain that was the 4 chord, and it was actually in the tonic was a different key. What I was going to say is that backhanded compliment or something is just like David's, and to a certain degree, my lack of musical theory knowledge, and neither of us went to music school, means that I'm more constrained by, well, I know this is the 1 chord, so what's going to fit next? I am constrained by that. But he's not really, because he's really not thinking in a music theory realm at all. He's just kind of riffing. So these kind of interesting things happen that I feel like if I were writing that song, I would never let that happen because, well, you don't start on a 4 chord. That's just, or whatever the thing may be.
Maybe that's what it is. It sounds really different and unique. So it was the main thing I picked up on when I first listened. I was like, just kind of keeping my attention. I need to keep listening to it, kind of figure out what's going on here.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, I guess, thinking about, like, as someone who doesn't really have, I mean, I studied jazz piano as a kid, so we've played with incredible artists where you get up on stage and you're like, and they want you to jump in and you're like, what key is it? And they're like, I don't know what key is it. I just put the capo on this fret and, you know, I couldn't tell you anything. I know something about chords. I'm not totally in the dark about it, but there's so many things that are satisfying about a 1 and a 4 and a 5 and how those fit together. And the Mexican folk songs are based on that too, but there's always these weird kind of twists to it.
And the fact that on the Mexican guitars, there's always like a 6th string or something that's sort of still ringing. So it is
the weird
1
tunings,
chord,
yeah.
but there's like a 6 in there or something. So that I think that also throws some new sounds onto the palette.
I think the other thing that informs that harmonically is kind of a great admiration for someone like Paul Simon, who like has these, you know, like a lot of the songs have very straightforward elements where the chords are not predictable ever, but they're kind of, you know, you can kind of like pick it apart. But then there's always some moment of the song where it totally explodes into another realm chordally. And so all of a sudden it's like, I think I'd read somewhere where he'd said, you know, like, it's almost like he wants every chord to be in the song. And so if he hasn't used those chords yet, then that's the bridge is where it's like all of a sudden it's kind of like a whole other world. And I feel like that's really inspiring for the lyrics if you kind of do that. And I think if you kind of build in some kind of release for the listener to have it go somewhere else so that when you come back to the first part, there's just like a deep satisfaction for the listener, I think. So
that makes me feel like we should play January tonight.
Oh yeah?
And that bridge goes
yeah.
somewhere crazy that I didn't like at first.
Yeah.
No, really.
I just want to stay in the zone.
Yeah. But I think I knew, I just like, and some of it's, sometimes when I'm stuck writing, I'll just, grab like a book of songs down from the shelf and like just flip through and try to find weird chords that just so my hands do something different and unpredictable for myself.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, I feel like I've loved working with producers too that have been like, all right, let's reevaluate what these chords are, because maybe you could be doing totally different chords, or instead of just going back from the 1 and the 2 minor, like where can this go up on the scale some more, and then how does that change what's happening?
Rhythm is also a huge part, and I found it's in the same kind of vein. Was that, in terms of your foundations, were you kind of good at rhythm generally, and have you worked on that to get better? How is that forming part of your sound? It's definitely an identity, I think.
Sure.
It's just, I always go back to this time when I had friends back in England and we would listen to mariachi music and that sort of thing, and we would have percussion instruments in the house and we would sit there and shake things along, and it's like, when I listen to your music, it's like, it makes me want to go back to doing that sort of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I think that some of it's the limitations of a musician like myself, that I don't have any skill really for kind of playing lead. So I've always been someone that's like, all right, well, what I can do, I'm gonna play the rhythm, like, and but then you kind of like hit, like after you're kind of just playing boom chick rhythm, like you hit a wall pretty quick in terms of like your interests, or you're like, okay, well, I have to do something different because this is not that interesting to me. And the Mexican rhythms for me just like opened up a whole other world where like, oh, as a rhythm guitarist, I could learn all these other things that feel like more related to my skill set than trying to do this other thing, which I don't feel like I can do at all. And so it's hard, but it's kind of something that's accessible. We've had this experience recently with this musician from Veracruz named Zanen Zeferino, who is like a master jarana player. So that's the main Mexican guitar that I play. And I feel like when I'm with him and playing with him, I'm like, oh, I'm just like at level 1 or 2, and he's at level 10 with this, you know, and he like, I'll never be like that.
There's always guys like that.
Yeah. But it's amazing to just feel like, okay, like all these cool rhythms that I'm doing, I'm still like at this basic level as someone who's kind of coming outside of the tradition, didn't grow up with it. I guess I'm just always more interested in songwriting than like sitting around and practicing rhythm guitar or lead guitar. Like everything for me is kind of in service to the songs.
Sure.
And that's the guiding force. I think there's been a lot of songs that we've taken that could have maybe gone in a more straightforward Americana vibe, but in the studio or with the producer or kind of as I'm working on the song and getting bored with it, once I start playing on the Mexican guitar, use the Mexican rhythms, I find that it opens up a lot more doors to explore, and a lot more, just seems more generative as a starting point. And so I think we've kind of pursued that muse to see kind of what we can build that in a way has then become part of the sonic identity of the band. That's like, oh yeah, it's got these 6/8 rhythms, and there's all this syncopation, and then you bring it, like the drummer that we've been playing with for so long now has got like an Afrobeat background, you know, he's like got a foot in that world, and so he's kind of thinking of, when he hears the 6/8 rhythms, like it has so much shared commonality with African music. That's where a lot of those rhythms came from. So then he's bringing those kind of that background, and he grew up kind of playing cumbia with his dad from El Salvador, and so then you have kind of that element of Latin rhythms.
And Suze, when you're turning to more the string arrangements and the harmonies, how have you gone about that process?
The harmonies are something that are so intrinsic to me. I can't
Just naturally?
really explain how I do it. People have kind of asked for tips on singing harmony, and it's hard for me to even teach it, because it's something I've done since I was so little.
Okay.
When I was growing up, I was homeschooled by my dad, and one of the things we did a lot was sing rounds.
Okay, yeah.
So you have to hold your part,
Yeah.
3 or 4 parts. So when we were really little, you could hold your part, and that I think is actually really good training for harmony singing, because everyone's singing a different note, part of the same chord probably, and you have to keep your part. But hear kind of the beautiful chords that it's making. So the harmonies just feel like I just go in there, and some of them I'm thinking about when he's writing the songs. I'll already be humming downstairs, and coming up with harmonies. But so much of it is just so natural and so fun. I love it. And then in the studio now we get to, add these layers of voices, and that's just pure joy for me. I could do that all day.
So is it mainly you that does the harmonizing?
Yeah, and usually there's a third part from one of our other bandmates.
Sure.
But some of them, there'll be like a multiple Suze vocals.
Suze over.
Yeah, any lady singing is me. And same with the violin. Yeah, I could just bask all day in adding layers of harmonies to make these string sections.
Because there are songs that have like a counter melody with your vocal, and that kind of complements as well. Like, it sounds like you guys have been performing together for years.
We have, oh yeah.
Yeah, you can
I think it was like our 1300th show or something tonight.
Yeah, I mean, and sometimes I think sometimes I am thinking about counter melodies, or because I don't have a very good ear for Suze knows what the harmony should be.
Okay.
Like what the third and the fifth are. I don't have an ear for that at all. So I guess I'm always thinking like, is there another melody that that other voice could sing? Or sometimes I can riff on some idea and then Suze will try to like translate whatever I'm spitting out and can kind of shape it into, something real. But so sometimes when we're working on parts, there's like a lot of just like going back and forth. Suze does a lot of improvisation in the live set, but we've been thinking more and more about kind of more arranged parts and working on that.
The other exciting thing I've been doing lately is using pedals for my fiddle for the first time, so electric guitar pedals. So I grew up playing old-time music and kind of in that bluegrass, folky vein, and there were no pedals. You'd never plugged in your violin. But now, like playing on a stage with drums and our more electric setup, I plug in my fiddle. But then now I'm the basic reverb pedal and this harmonies pedal where you can like have make harmonies yourself. Or I've been using the octave pedal, and then that ocean pedal that has like shimmer and mod. I don't even know what they stand for. With the tremolo, I don't know what all the things are. But it's so fun to either bow with those effects, or I've been doing a lot of pizzicato and like holding it down here like a mandolin and plucking it. So I'll do that tonight, and it just opens up just new palettes for the same instrument, and it's been really exciting.
Moving on to more lyrical side of things, where do you pull influences from? Me, personally, I'm terrible at writing lyrics. I can write guitar riffs, songs, guitars, and then when it comes to lyrics, I crash in bed. So I'd love to hear some tips as to how you kind of come up with these lyrics that are so relatable, clearly have a personal angle, but just seem so relatable for people as well.
I mean, some of it's I live with my editor, so that's important.
Okay.
To have someone that kind of can help you
keep it relatable.
Keep it relatable. There are a lot of ways to think about it, and I've been writing songs since I was 13, so I've kind of tried a lot of different ways of doing it, and I don't think there's like this is the way to write song lyrics. Like there's just so many ways that work, and I just know that if I hear a song and I think the lyrics are kind of like throwaway lyrics, I can't listen to the song. I have to discard the song. It gets in the way if the lyrics aren't just like have some meaning to the songwriter or the singers and are saying something. And so, but if it's something that's like didactic or saying, like this is what the song is about and this is what I want you to feel, it's like you have to create a space for the listener to kind of inhabit the world and be able to bring their own meaning to it, and you're kind of guiding them, kind of emotionally guiding them somewhere. I think good places to start are kind of thinking about places that are emotionally vulnerable in your psyche, and going into those places. I think that's like a fruitful place as a writer. I think that sometimes it starts as total nonsense and you kind of try to get to some level of your subconscious relationship to the world, and I'm just kind of spouting nonsense, but then I'm trying to go back and decode it and decipher it, and then through that process kind of finding some image or some sound that I really love, and then kind of trying to build a narrative in my mind about what I think this song is about. So there's so much of like, there's a delicate balance of like how much you're imposing on it and how much you're kind of trying to follow it. Sometimes I'm picking up a poem that I really love and singing to it and kind of just having that be a starting point, and then I start kind of, what would the next verse be like that's not already written by this other poet?
That's a cool way of thinking about it. Yeah.
Sometimes I'm translating Mexican folk songs into English, and that's my starting point. It's just like for me, it's just like anything goes that can get you just doing it. And then I think not accepting that it's done. Like, I think that very rarely have we done a record where I felt like, okay, it's, I've kind of like dissected it so many times or tried so many different approaches. And every once in a while a verse gets on there that I know is not as good as it could be. But a lot of it's just kind of writing 10 more verses, and not kind of that like Leonard Cohen school of thought that's just like, just continuing to do it, keep writing those verses, and luckily I have someone that can kind of like help me sift through it, and like Suze has a perspective because she's one step outside of it, that she can kind of identify what value is there in a way that I try to be agnostic about it and try to just generate stuff and not judge it. But you need to at some point judge it and make decisions. And so I feel like I've been very fortunate to kind of find a partner like Suze that can be outside of the song one step, but still very deeply involved in every piece of it, to help us kind of figure out, well, what's the song about, or what's speaking to her, and then kind of let that guide where the song goes lyrically.
I know you're diagnosed with bipolar, and I wondered if that kind of relates to how songs are coming about now, and what is that influencing the process at all, and what's that been like for you?
Yeah, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder in my 20s.
Right, okay.
And then was, medicated and got better for a while, okay. And was off meds and touring and having kids. Mm-hmm. We have 2 little kids now. But last year I was sort of having a relapse of these symptoms, which are like, this sort of manic, nights where you can't sleep. Your brain is going so fast. Mm-hmm. For me, it often involved kind of this writing and kind of this sort of creative burst, but then it would always be followed by a massive depressive crash. And I think the question for me now, I'm back on really great medicines that I highly recommend to anyone going through a similar thing. Sure. But the big question, the psychiatrists look at our lifestyle and say, bipolar brains need regularity, predictability, routine. And I am looking at our life as, touring musicians and parent and moms, and as a mom and, really trying to wrestle with whether or not it's okay for me to continue to do this and how to make it a healthy, sustainable path.
So how do you do that? What changes do you make?
Well, the medicines have really helped, yeah. And then really thinking about home time as rest time and keeping that as routine as possible. I've recently we've had varying success at sticking to it, but I made this very detailed schedule of our home days, because when you're on tour, it's pretty routine. You're getting up, breakfast, driving a long way, sound check, dinner, taking the kids to bed somewhere, coming back, playing the show, merch, chatting with fans, downshifting, going to bed, doing it all over again. But at home, it's so free form that was hard for me. So I just keeping a real sense of routine and predictability at home, and really trying to prioritize sleep. Sure. And our kids are now 6 and 2 and actually sleeping a little better. So yeah, just really knowing that that's incredible thing that I have to stay healthy and stable.
That's important. Well, thanks for sharing that. That's interesting to hear. And yeah, how hard it would be to figure out a routine doing what you do. It sounds like you've got people to support and help you through that.
Yeah. Which is good. And I think, because we've done it long enough, touring, that when you're on tour, it is a real routine.
Yeah, of course.
And now just, it's just a different schedule, but really just trying to sleep in when we stay up late, and just knowing that the tour is its own schedule, and then kind of switching to the home schedule. But yeah, just trying to keep some stability within both of those. Sure. But touring is hard for people who have a proclivity towards alcoholism. Yep. There's so many ways that touring is a challenge for people.
So have you been to Calgary before?
We've played a bunch of the Canadian folk festivals. Okay. So we played Calgary, Edmonton, Vancouver,
Winnipeg, and
Ottawa, and Winnipeg.
Oh, wow.
But it's been several years, so This is our first time back, and it's really great to be back.
Probably a little bit colder than you. It's warmed up actually recently. It's like -20 or something. Definitely. I put 2 coats when it's weather. It's really cool. So what have you guys got planned for the next release-wise, are you guys just touring this recent album and still writing and recording the next one maybe?
Yeah, well, we have this one that's kind of done that we're just starting to think about shopping around.
Okay.
And we have, for me, yeah, it's kind of like, I like the Woody Allen school of thought where it's like, finished one movie and then before it even comes out, you're on to the next one. And so if that one that you worked on earlier gets panned or whatever, you just kind of like are removed from the critical success or failure of that project. And I think that's been helpful for me to just kind of seize the momentum of the next creative project and kind of move on as quick as possible, and not look back.
That's cool, that's powerful to be able to do that. I mean, I found it hard to not just dwell on stuff and figuring out how you're going to market and promote and do all that sort of stuff that goes with it. But to move on creatively to something else, that's quite cool. And each of your albums seems to be distinctly different as well, so you can kind of see part of your mental process.
Yeah, I think to just keep it fresh and to follow, to let the songs kind of guide a lot of that. But yeah, there's just like a new batch now that I'm kind of working at, and they have a long way to go. So it's just like kind of keep pushing one up the hill and then take a break and push another one up the hill. And
so what are you aiming for the next release? Kind of another album, full album, or any kind of?
Yeah, there's another album but I think excited about nowadays, where everybody's kind of moving back to the singles world and kind of thinking about what opportunities that presents. It's like, all right, we can just find a producer we want to try one song with, or some musicians we want to try one thing with, and kind of less of the intense investment of a record and more experimentation. So I think that is inspiring and an exciting idea for me. So I feel like hopefully we'll pursue more of those kind of projects too.
That's cool. Well, that's great to hear. I'm looking forward to hearing more. Only just discovering you. It's an interesting journey even this far. Thanks for coming on the show, guys. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having us.
And I'm looking forward to see you guys play later.
Great.
Excellent.
So thanks for watching, everyone. You can check out the links of David Wax Museum below. Like, subscribe, share, all those sorts of wonderful things. And I'll see you next time. Thank you.